Welcome to another episode of Mike's Money Picks. Today on the podcast, college football is finally all the way back. Tonight, we are going to preview the Thursday night slate of college football DFS action. We've got a 10-game slate, which I don't know why DraftKings decided to make it 10 games, but they did, so we're rolling with it. And so we're going to break down all 10 of those games and tell you who you need to be looking at for your DraftKings DFS lineups. If you are, someone who just bets CFB or, does player props or, pickups on underdog or something like that, then a lot of this stuff can apply to that as well, not just DFS. But we're going to give you guys all the information you need to know so that way you can pick the right guys for Thursday night. And I do got to say, this is the start of college football season, so we probably got some new faces here watching. If you are new, welcome. Glad to have you. Go ahead and hit that subscribe button so that way you can be with us for the rest of college football season, because we will have DFS previews and picks for the entire rest of the college football season, including week one. Our Saturday episode is going to be getting uploaded tomorrow, so make sure you are on the lookout for that. And while you're at it, go ahead and, if this video helps you out in any way, please hit the like button, share it with a friend, let people know. It really does help me out a ton when you guys do that, and I really do appreciate it. If you're listening on audio, you can subscribe to the audio. You can also rate and review the audio, which helps me out a ton as well. All right, let's go ahead and dive into this slate, y'all. We got 10 games to break down. We don't have any time to waste. Let's go ahead and look into it. So the reason why this slate is so large on DraftKings is because they included a lot of FBS versus FCS games, which always brings up like a chicken and egg debate. Right? Because, in these FBS, FCS games, there's a big time blowout risk because there's a big risk that, whoever you end up playing on these FBS teams that are big favorites, there's a big chance that they end up getting taken out in the second half or the fourth quarter because their team is up so much. There's also a chance that, they play a little bit more vanilla, running quarterbacks don't want to take a lot of hits. There's a lot of like little intricacies like that, but it always brings up the debate when you build your DFS lineups. Do you play the guy when there's a chance that he could be in a game where his team wins in a blowout? And so really what I want to look for this is I want to look for teams where I think that it's very likely that the touchdowns are going to come from one or two people and try to play those one or two people, or look for games where the FBS team might not be very stout defensively and the game could turn into a little bit of a shootout. And to me, the New Hampshire and Central Florida game is like the best example of this. So in terms of the current lines, UCF is 40.5-point favorites in this game with a total of 63.5, which means that UCF is projected to win this game about 52-12. Y'all, if you're new here, I always round off on the totals because, there's no way that a team can score 51.75 points. So 52-12 is the projection. That makes UCF one of the highest projected scoring teams of the slate. And I got to say, I feel like this is a team where we can pinpoint where the production is going to come from because of, how clear their depth chart is. KJ Jefferson is going to be the starting quarterback. If that name sounds familiar to you, he is a familiar face in a different place. He's been the Arkansas quarterback for the last 2 seasons or last 3 seasons, I believe. And he's pretty good, and he's a dual threat. He is going to run a lot. So like with KJ piling up the stats with his arm, with his legs. And, he's a big guy, so he's got a chance to score some rushing touchdowns as well. I think that it's pretty clear that a lot of the production for this UC offense is going to be run through KJ. And then at the running back position, they returned starter RJ Harvey, who was great last season, literally scored double-digit fantasy points in every single game he played. That is not easy. Had multiple games over 30 fantasy points, so he's got a high ceiling. He's got a high floor. I think he's an outstanding cash game play in DFS on this slate because even if there is a blowout, there's a pretty good chance that he ran for 100 yards or scored multiple touchdowns. Now, where the depth chart gets interesting is behind Harvey. Penny Boone was like the MAC player of the year last year. Well, maybe was he the player of the year? I don't know. I don't know if he won that award or not, but he was great at Toledo, and Toledo was one of the best teams in the MAC, averaged 22 fantasy points a game. He transferred to Louisville, was not going to win the starting job, transferred to UCF afterwards, and he's listed as an or on the second string with Johnny Richardson. So, Penny Boone is a bigger guy. There's a chance he could vulture a touchdown, but with Boone and Richardson being listed as the or guys, that makes me think that Harvey's role as the number 1 running back is pretty darn secure, and it really makes me think that Harvey is the guy you want at the running back position. Now, at the wide receiver position, UCF did have some guys transfer in. They returned starters Kobe Hudson and Xavier Townsend. They're going to start again. The third listed starter is Trent Whittemore. which is interesting because you would think that the incoming transfers, Javarius Johnson and Jacoby Jones, are more talented, more accomplished than Whittemore, but Whittemore apparently edged him out and still has the starting nod. But this is a Gus Malzahn offense. They are going to operate at a fast tempo. It would not shock me entirely to see a rotation where Javarius Johnson and Jacoby Jones do get in the game quite a bit. So I do think that Hudson and Townsend are the two that are like the most secure. Hudson was their number one, or really their number two wide receiver last year after Javon Baker, depending on how you view it. But Hudson had a high ceiling as well. He had 2 games over 29 fantasy points. He is kind of the playmaker and the guy in this offense this year, I would expect. But if you're looking to play people off this UCF offense, I don't think you have to stack KJ Jefferson with a wide receiver to, have him at his most effectiveness, especially considering Jefferson and Hudson would be a very expensive stack. So I do think that you can just play KJ Jefferson by himself, or you can stack him with one of those wide receivers. And I think you could even stack him with 2 wide receivers and just hope that he gets most of his passes via the air as opposed to with his legs. Now, UCF is a team that plays at a fast tempo. They are also a team that was not very stout defensively last year. They've never really been known for their defense. So this is an FCS team in New Hampshire that might actually be able to score some points. They are projected to score 12 according to the Vegas total. So, if this team's able to get a few touchdowns, you could very easily make a game stack out of this, especially considering the price points of these New Hampshire guys. Seth Morgan is only $5,300. He's their starting quarterback. At running back, they have an or on the depth chart, Miles Thomason and Isaac Sadie. I assume Sadie is how you pronounce that. Really, with there being an or there, that has me totally not intrigued to play those guys. But at receiver, they have a very clear starting 3 of Corcoran, Burke, and Tomlinson, all of whom are between $4,900 or $5,700. So I think you can really make a game stack of this game work if you were to do like Morgan and then 1 or 2 of those New Hampshire receivers, and then Jefferson, and then maybe one of the UCF receivers. I really think you can make a game stack of this game work and hope that, New Hampshire pushes Central Florida a little bit and this game stays a little bit close. One thing that, I kind of glossed over it, but most of these games have depth charts that have been released for them. The one thing to look out for, though, as we already talked about, is the word or on the depth chart, because the or basically means that guys going to be playing, a lot of snaps, going to be rotating positions, and it's really, really hard to trust when there's a lot of ors in a depth chart. Example 1 would be SMU last Saturday in week 0. All their skill positions except for RJ Maryland had an or next to their name. And it turned out that one running back, Brashad Smith, ended up being the guy that you wanted. None of the receivers ending up being the guys you wanted, but the guy that didn't have the or, RJ Maryland, he was the guy that went out and balled out. So definitely, I do think if you see teams using the ors on the depth charts, I do think that is something that when somebody doesn't have an or, that guy should kind of trigger in your mind a little bit. Wait a minute, this guy might be the real deal. This guy might be one of their, playmakers, one of their favorite players. Now, next up, we got to talk about Lafayette at Buffalo. This is a game that didn't need to be on this slate, if I'm being honest. Like I don't know where DraftKings decided to draw the line between having this one on there and not having like Wake Forest versus North Carolina A&T. Like I don't know what Buffalo or Lafayette did to get on this slate personally. Anyway, if it's on the slate, we're going to talk about it. So this one is the closest spread of an FCS game on the slate. Buffalo is 3.5-point favorites with a total of 46.5. That is one of the lowest on the slate. The projected score, I should say, is Buffalo about 25-22. So neither of the teams really projected to be all that high scoring. But the good news is that we can kind of pinpoint where the production is going to come from. Buffalo is going to start CJ Ogbonna at quarterback, and at only $5,800. Pretty reasonable. He was not exactly good when he played for them last year, but $5,800 starting salary for a starting quarterback going up against an FCS team, that's kind of appealing. I kind of understand that a little bit. I would rather go with one of the running backs, though. They're quite cheap. They do have an or. It is listed as Aljay Henderson or Lamar Sperling. They are the first 2 ahead of Barksdale, who's the highest price on DraftKings. So I kind of think that Henderson and Sperling, they can be a little bit of a value because, again, they're an FBS team going up against an FCS opponent. They are listed as the top 2 on the depth chart, and they're quite cheap. So I think that those 2 guys are 2 guys to look out for. And then at the receiver position for Buffalo, look, this is not a great passing offense. Like this is not like the USC Lincoln Riley teams in terms of their passing offense. So like, don't get super excited about this group, but the listed starters are Snow, who is all the way down at $3,000 even. Johnson, who is 4,400, and then McMillan, who is 4,800 on DraftKings. Like, those are cheap starting receivers, but like, this is not some high flying passing offense. If you're playing Ogbonna, I would recommend stacking him with one of those guys, but I'm probably not going to get to them outside of that specific stack. Now, on the Lafayette side, this is a FCS team that has some life. They're only 3.5-point dogs, right? Dean DeNoble is their starting quarterback. He's returning from last year. He wasn't like a super productive quarterback last year. In fact, with the Lafayette team too, you can look at the one game they played against an FBS opponent last year. It was against Duke. They lost 42-7. This Buffalo team that they're about to play is a lot worse than that Duke team that they played last year, though. So I do think this game could stay a little bit close, but DeNoble is just okay. $5,500 though, it's hard to argue with that price tag. I cannot recommend a game stack of this game because that total is just quite ugly, and these are two offenses that are quite ugly. But I do think that DeNoble and Ogbonna both make for solid value plays at quarterback. And then Jamar Curtis is Lafayette's running back, and look, this guy can tote the rock. He ran for almost 1,500 yards last season at the FCS level. Obviously, it's a step up in competition playing FBS Buffalo, but they're going to give it to him, and they're going to keep giving it to him. Like, this guy's going to get carry after carry after carry. He ended the FCS season last year with 4 out of his last 5 games of 27 carries or more. This is a workhorse running back, which there are not many on the slate. And so if you're somebody like me who values volume in the run game, then Jamar Curtis is a guy that you have to be considering for your lineups. And at a price tag of only $4,700 on DraftKings, that is quite affordable. Now, another thing with Lafayette is that they return all their production, right? So the receivers that you see here, Stewart, Karashia, Persing, and Holmes, those are the guys that are going to play. I don't think you need to stack DeNoble if you want to. If you don't want to, I should say. But, this is an FCS team that's going to have some life. I don't mind getting a piece of it, but I do not want a full game stack it because of the ugly game environment, which kind of brings me to another takeaway from week 0, which was that everybody stacked up the Georgia Tech versus Florida State game, and that ended up being the worst game to stack. Now, the reason why everybody stacked it up is because they had a lot of guys that were just comfortable clicks, right? Like, you knew who the starting quarterback was going to be. You knew who the starting running back was going to be. You knew who was going to be out there at wide receiver. They were easy, comfortable clicks, and everybody ended up making those comfortable clicks and playing too many of them. And the people who ended up stacking the later 2 games, playing some of the more chancy, more unknown guys, were guys that ended up paying off for them. So don't fall into that trap. Don't play all the comfortable clicks. If you're playing DFS, especially if you're playing GPPs, you got to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and you have to sell yourself a story when you make your lineup, right? And so if you're going Lafayette, Buffalo, if you're playing some of these guys, if you're playing Ogbonna on Buffalo, your story would be, hey, he improved a lot from last year. He's got to step down in competition. That's going to be the guy. If you're playing some of these guys on Lafayette, the story you're telling yourself is, hey, this is a team returning a lot of their starters. They're not any worse than this Buffalo team. They're going to be able to hang. They're going to be able to put up points. Tell yourself a story while you're building that lineup, and it'll help you out a lot. Now, I get to talk about 2 teams that I'm actually pretty familiar with because up until this year, I coached high school football in the state of North Carolina. So a lot of guys that I coached against have ended up playing at these 2 schools. Really, all the schools in North Carolina, they're Division I level. I kind of know guys that have been at all of them, right? So Western Carolina and NC State is next up, which is kind of why I was a little disappointed when, Wake versus A&T didn't make the cut for this slate because, I know a lot of guys in that game. But anyway, we've got Western Carolina heading to Raleigh to take on NC State. The spread is NC State minus 33.5. The total is 60.5 points. That makes the projection about 47-14 in favor of the Wolfpack. I got to say that on the Western side, this is not like an FCS team that you can get super excited about. Gonzalez is their returning starting quarterback. He averaged 22 fantasy points per game last season. They played 1 game against an FBS opponent last year, and they got whomped 56-13 by Arkansas. So I don't think that this is a great spot for them. NC State's a pretty solid defensive team anyway. So they're not a team that I would be going out of my way to target with an FBS opponent as opposed to an FCS opponent. The one thing I will say about Western Carolina, though, is that they're a very run-heavy team. Their starting running back transferred up. So Branson Adams was not the starter last year, but he is going to be the starter this year. Only 4,400. If they're able to keep the game somewhat close, he's going to get a ton of carries. And then at the wide receiver position, they do start Jones, Colombo, and Tamarez. Yeah, Tamares is all the way down there at 3,500. Those are the 3 listed starters. Take with that what you will, but I don't think this is a team you need to play a whole lot of guys from. NC State is an interesting one, though, because Grayson McCall is their new quarterback coming over from Coastal Carolina. I like Grayson McCall's game a lot. I think he was very much misused his last 2 years at Coastal since they had the coaching change and were no longer under Jamie Chadwell. And this is a guy who's a dual threat. He's got deceptive mobility, which I feel like is something that you only say about like white quarterbacks that can run. But anyway, he's faster than people give him credit for. He's more mobile than people give him credit for. And he's just a competitor. He's just a dog. Like you watch him at Coastal, and he just knows how to make plays. NC State is an offense that has been historically quarterback friendly with Robert Anae as their offensive coordinator. You know, he was the guy that really made Bryce Perkins and Brennan Armstrong great at Virginia. Brennan Armstrong, when he was the starter last year, had a pretty doggone good year. McCall is looking to follow in those footsteps. I think this is a great system for him. And I think this is a great price tag for him. Like, you look at this at slate entirely, and McCall is like way down the list at quarterback at $7,100. And I think that there's a pretty solid chance that he ends the slate as being the highest scoring quarterback of the night. Honestly, I think there's a chance that that happens. You know, they're projected to score 47 points. So there's definitely a world in which McCall accounts for 5 or 6 touchdowns. You know, whether it takes him a half or 3 quarters to get there, there's a chance that McCall is the highest scoring quarterback of the night. He is one of my favorite plays at the quarterback position of the night. Now, at the running back position, the NC State beat writers have been all over Jordan Waters, who is a Duke transfer coming into this NC State offense. He's been getting a lot of hype in camp. He is going to be the first running back out. NC State is historically a team that has used a committee at running back, but Waters could be a guy that could break that trend. I do think he's a pretty legitimately good player. I have no problem playing him, especially against an FCS opponent where NC State will definitely have the advantage on the line. At the wide receiver position, it's kind of as expected with NC State. Kevin Concepcion, Dakari Collins, and Noah Rogers are the 3 starters. They did have some transfers in. Wesley Grimes from Wake Forest. Justin Jolly is their tight end from UConn. And then also another guy to look out for is Terrell Anderson. He's a freshman out of Greensboro who is quite talented, been making some noise in camp. He's currently listed number 2 or like second string on the depth chart, but it wouldn't shock me to see him play some snaps. It wouldn't shock me to see Grimes play a lot of snaps either. But Concepcion is like the easy click here. You know, he was their number 1 receiver last year. They used him out of the backfield as well. He's just super talented, a guy that you get the ball in his hands and he makes people miss, breaks tackles. Really good football player. He's up there at $7,700 though. So I really like Noah Rogers as a stacking partner with Grayson McCall here on this slate, because Noah Rogers, very talented, went to Ohio State out of high school, wasn't getting to play, as a lot of talented guys don't get to play at Ohio State, and now he's back at NC State. He is probably, in terms of pure talent, the most talented guy in this receiving core, and there's a chance, like there's a world where Rodgers is really able to eat into Concepcion's targets, because last year Concepcion had a ton of volume. There's a world where Rodgers really eats into that volume, and Rodgers ends up scoring a lot of fantasy points and takes away from Concepcion. So really for this slate, you know, I say it all the time, I'm somebody who plays a 20 max usually. I'm going to have some McCall stacks with Concepcion. I'm going to have some McCall stacks with Rodgers. Those are the main 2 I'm interested in. Jolly as a tight end would appeal to me if we had to play tight ends, but really the fact that he's lumped in here with the receivers, he's only $3,700, so that is kind of appealing, but he would be more appealing to me if we had to play a tight end, because he would be one of the best on the slate. All right, let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's move on to the next setting. So I do want to let you guys know, if you do want more information from me, there is a way that you can get it. I am on Twitter at Mike's Money Picks. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. You know, if you see any depth chart news or something, or just have any questions about a specific guy, just reach out to me. I'm more than happy to answer on there. I also post a DFS rundown prior to every slate where I kind of highlight some categorical things that just kind of pop into my mind. But also really, I'm in the Fantasy Corner Discord, which to me is one of the best places you can be if you play a lot of DFS. There are a lot of smart people that play a lot of different sports for DFS in there. The college football chat is one of the best ones. We've got people who are in there posting depth charts, you know, following injury news, talking plays, talking strategy. It's a great group of guys. It's a lot of fun to just be in there and chat it up. And it's a lot of fun in there to talk DFS and win some money together also. So if you're looking for more people to talk DFS with, join the Fantasy Corner Discord. I cannot recommend it enough. And then if you want to know who makes my official DFS lineups, I post my core plays for both DraftKings and Fanduel for every college football slate on my Patreon, patreon.com/Mike'sMoneyPicks. They always come with a nice little write-up as well, where I talk a little bit of strategy, a little bit of stuff on, anticipated ownership and pivots and stuff like that. So, I'm not just going to sit here and promise that you can just play those plays and instantly win millions of dollars. It's not that easy, but I do think that it can help you with your own process, help you build your process, and help you find the right guys as we navigate all of these different college football slates and all these college football teams. College football is not like the NFL. You have teams who play very legitimately different styles. And so, having somebody that knows that information, that understands where people are going to go in DFS can certainly be helpful. So patreon.com/Mike'sMoneyPicks if you want to check that out. All right, the next game on the docket is Murray State heading to Missouri. Now, Murray State is not exactly an easy team to find a depth chart for. I will kind of warn you on that. That's a reason why all their quarterbacks are listed as $4,900 on DraftKings. If I'm able to find any information on these guys, I will tweet it out. I promise that. And the sad part is that Murray State would be like, I don't know, they're a team that might have a guy worth playing because Missouri is not exactly a great defense, but it's really hard to play these guys when we don't know who is going to be starting. The current spread for this game is Missouri minus 47.5 with a total of 57.5. So the projected score is 52-5. So Vegas doesn't have a lot of respect for Murray State at all, but I've seen this Missouri defense get cooked enough times to know that, Murray State might be able to get a touchdown or two in this one. On the Missouri side, they return a lot of their production from last season. Brady Cook is their returning quarterback. He is enough of a runner that he can get you fantasy points with his legs. He's also pretty safe with the football. Like, he's not going to make bonehead turnovers. This is a game where he shouldn't have to take a whole lot of chances, can just kind of dunk his way down the field. And I think that Brady Cook at $8,500 is slightly overpriced, but I think he's a solid play considering his team's implied to score 52 points. Running back is a little bit of a mess this week for Missouri. Marcus Carroll and Nate Noel both transferred in after Cody Schrader graduated. Both of them are transfers from the G5. Both of them are transfers from the Sun Belt, actually, who started for their teams last year and very productive for their teams last year. Marcus Carroll from Georgia State, Nate Noel from Appalachian State. It's very unclear who is going to get more carries. It could not be more unclear who is going to get more carries between Carroll and Noel. This week will give us a little bit of a clue. If you want to, press your luck and play one of them, knock yourself out. They got a great matchup. They're sure to score points on the ground, but picking between the two of them, I don't know how to pick between the two of them right now. So, maybe if you're playing 20 maxes like me, might I include Carroll in a few? Might I include Noel in a few? Sure. But I definitely think that your guess is as good as mine as to which one ends up being the better back in the system. Now, at the wide receiver position, Missouri has probably the best wide receiver in all of college football. It's Luther Burden III, a.k.a. LB3. He is an absolute target monster. He really excelled last year in the games where he was up against weaker competition as well. So this is just a really good spot for Luther Burden III, in my opinion. $9,000 is quite the price tag, though. A Cook Burden stack is really, really expensive. But I do think he is very clearly the best receiver option on the slate. He's just priced like it. So I think that that's going to create a little bit of difficulty with how far up he is priced. Now, Theo Weiss would be the pivot off of him. He's an Oklahoma transfer who played at Missouri all of last season and was seemingly always the pivot off of Burden. If Burden ever didn't have like a super great game, there was a chance that Weiss was having a good game, in his place. I don't mind targeting Weiss for that reason. It's very clearly a wide receiver 1 and wide receiver 2 situation between the two of them, though. Next up, we have got Coastal Carolina heading to take on Jacksonville State. This is probably the second best FBS versus FBS matchup on the slate, which isn't saying a whole lot. But, this game has some serious shootout potential because neither of these two teams play a lot of defense. Both of them play at a fast tempo. Currently, Vegas has this game as Jacksonville State minus 2.5 with a total of 55.5. So in other words, it's projected to be Jacksonville State about 29-27. Coastal Carolina right now has co-starters listed as quarterback. Ethan Vasco is returning from their system from last year. He played a few games when Grayson McCall was hurt. Noah Kim is a transfer from Michigan State. Kim was a more prized recruit outside of high school, but Vasco, I think, is a more versatile player, has more experience in the system. I think that if we know which one's going to play, which we don't, that they're listing co-starters. If we knew which one was going to play, Vasco would be a very solid option because of what he provides with his mobility and his knowledge of the system. But if they're playing two quarterbacks, it's a hard pass for me. Just not going to deal with it. Now, Coastal is a team that historically uses a committee at the running back position. But this year, they lost a lot of their talent from last year at the running back position. Braden Bennett is really the only one from last year that returns, and his stats last year will not wow you when you look at him. But if he's going to be the only running back in what was a big time committee, that definitely makes him appealing at a salary of only $5,200. At the wide receiver position, Coastal is going to start Jamison Tucker at the wide receiver spot. Everybody else has an or listed next to their name. So really, he's the only like locked in starter that they have. He's the most expensive one for that reason. So he might be the one that you'd want to target if you would want to target a Coastal receiver. But I got to be honest, I would rather target the rushing game on both sides of this matchup as opposed to the passing game. Speaking of the rushing game, Jacksonville State, they are coached by Rich Rodriguez, believe it or not, and they have 3 starters listed at quarterback. So Logan Smothers played some games for him last year. I think that he would have been the logical starter, but he's listed as a co-starter with 2 other guys. So that's another situation that's a hard pass. Now, Jacksonville State is another team that had a big-time committee last year, had a lot of guys from the committee leave. Ron Wiggins is also out for quite some time. So Anwar Lewis is the guy that I think will be stepping in the stead as the starter. He is listed as an or on the depth chart with Andrew Paul, but last season Lewis very clearly outsnapped, and was more effective than Paul. So Lewis would be the guy that I would want to go with in this situation among those guys. PJ Wells at receiver is the only non-or player in the entire skill position lineup for the Jacksonville State Gamecocks. So he's really the only receiver that I would seriously consider. Petaway played a lot of snaps for them last year. Spector is a Clemson transfer who's probably one of the most talented guys here. Brown is their tight end, but it's really hard to get behind a passing offense where you don't know who the starting quarterback is going to be. You don't know who half of the starting wide receivers are going to be. And I really think this is a game where you can just play it through the running backs. And Lewis gets the nod to me from Jacksonville State. Bennett gets the nod to me from Coastal Carolina. Next up, we've got Lindenwood taking on Kansas. So Lindenwood is another team that is at the FCS level. I cannot find a depth chart for them. I'm being totally honest. I haven't found one yet. So I don't know what to make of them. What I have read, though, and I've done as much research as I can, though, y'all, Caldwell is their guy offensively. He's at wide receiver. He's $4,100. So if you're looking to play anybody on this Lindenwood offense, the only one that people really seem to be hyping up is Caldwell. But I do want to talk more about Lindenwood in general, though, as opposed to just some DFS options. So Lindenwood moved from the D2 level to the FCS level last season. As you could expect, they routinely got out-talented. They routinely got bullied on the offensive and defensive lines, and they routinely got ran by in deep passes. You can look at the stats. It's very clear that this team could not defend the run and they could not defend the deep ball. So if they couldn't do that against FCS opponents, how are they going to do against Kansas? Yeah. So this game is currently Kansas minus 44.5 with a total of 58.5, which means that the projected score is about 51-7 in favor of the Jayhawks. Now for Kansas, they return a lot of their starters on offense. Jalen Daniels is their returning starting quarterback who had a strange back injury last year and didn't play the entire second half of the season. He is a dual threat. He can run, he can throw. He is very good, and he's got a huge upside, and I really think he's a very solid play at $9,500. He kind of fits the mold of the KJ Jefferson that we were talking about earlier, where whether it be by his arm or by his legs, he is very likely to account for multiple touchdowns on this Kansas side. Kansas is also a team that loves to run the football. Like I said, Lindenwood was a team that got bullied last year at the FCS level. So if FCS teams can bully them, Kansas can bully them. Kansas is a team that knows how to run the football, and really, they won't go away from it if they feel like you can't stop it. And so Devin Neal is the starter, averaged about 15 carries a game last season and was quite effective. He's one of the best running backs in all college football. He's at $7,900 for this one. If you're not going to play Daniels, I like the idea of getting to Neal. And we've talked about enough salary savers here on this episode that I do think that you can get to one of Daniels or Neal in your lineup. If you want to be different, Daniel Highshaw is Neal's backup. He is very clearly the backup, but he is good enough that he pretty much gets almost 10 carries a game. So he's definitely a guy that's worth considering. If The problem is with Highshaw, though, is that if the game was a super blowout, he would be getting rested too, because he's important enough that they wouldn't run him out there in a 50-point game. What your hope is that Neal would either like get rested super earlier than Highshaw, or Highshaw is the one that ends up scoring the touchdowns because maybe they don't want to put a whole lot of mileage on Neal. So I think that that's a very clear pivot in DFS. If a lot of people are probably going to play Neal, Highshaw would be the pivot. If Neal doesn't have a great game, it's very likely that Highshaw would, or it's very likely that Jalen Daniels would. So, if you're worried about Neal because you think a lot of people are going to play him, which I do think is a possibility, play Highshaw or play Daniels. At the wide receiver spot, Kansas does return their top 3 wide receivers from last year, Arnold, Skinner, and Grimm. The downside is that none of them were ever very consistent in terms of earning targets on a consistent basis, no matter who was at quarterback. So what does that mean? Well, it means that you can play them. And I think Arnold's the best option for the record, but you can play them and just hope to get it right. Like if you're playing in 20 max lineups, you're playing, 10 lineups with Daniels in it. I don't think you need to match or to stack Daniels with more than one quarterback personally, but I'm sorry, I phrased that poorly. I don't think you need to stack Daniels with more than one wide receiver, but any one of them 3 can do it. I think Arnold's the best one. Grimm really showed some signs in the bowl game last year. Skinner's still going to play a ton of snaps, though. So you take your, press your luck, take your shot with one of those 3. If you were playing Daniels, or Daniels is a mobile enough guy, I think you can do so without stacking him. Also is an option. All right, that does it for the second trio of games. Let's go ahead and take a quick breather, and then let's close this thing out. All right, now on to what might be considered the game of the night. And I got to be honest, as I see this line start creeping up to be, Colorado more and more of a favorite, because since the time I did this research, the line has moved a point. Colorado was 9.5-point favorites. Now they are 10.5-point favorites. So I got to say, as this line continues to creep, I really feel inclined to kind of take North Dakota State with the points in this one as a bet. But let's break down why. So, when I did the research, Colorado was 9.5-point favorites with a total of 58.5, which is a projected total of about 34-24 in favor of the Buffaloes. Now, for the North Dakota State side, they do return their starting quarterback, Cam Miller. He is a dual threat. He ran for over 600 yards last year. And, quarterbacks had a lot of success against Colorado last year. Really, a lot of offenses had success against Colorado last year. The starting running back for North Dakota State is listed as TK Marshall, who was not exactly like a lead back for them last year, but that's what he's apparently going to be this year. He's only $4,500 on DraftKings, very affordable price tag. Now, this is not a team that's going to have a ton of passing volume, but at starters, for the wide receiver position, they listed Lance and Nelson as the 2 starters. And then at tight end, it is Stoffel. Nelson is probably the most appealing of the bunch, most success last year in the receiving game. But still, this is not a huge passing volume team. This is a team that wants to run the football with both their running back and their quarterback. And Colorado last year, in the games they lost, were games that they really got bullied on the front lines. Coach Prime has tried to fix some of that by recruiting through the transfer portal and, trying to upgrade the offensive and defensive lines. But North Dakota State, this is a team that in the FCS level historically has had some great lines on both the offensive and the defensive side. They've sent guys to the NFL on the line. So I really think that this is a game where North Dakota State can do what they do, and either Miller or Marshall, I think, has a chance to have a big game here in this one. Even if, the game goes, according to what Vegas thinks, and Colorado does win by double digits, then, there's still a chance that North Dakota State's going to score some points. 34-24 is the projected score. So North Dakota State, I do think, is a pretty targetable team here on this Thursday night slate. Now, on the Colorado side, I like their guys as fantasy options. I do not like their price tags. So Shedeur Sanders is $10,000 on DraftKings. He gives you 0 rushing upside. He did not rush for positive yardage last year because sacks count for negative rushing yards in college football. That is another gripe I have for another time. But you're paying for $10,000 more than any other quarterback on the slate, and all the other ones near the top give you rushing upside, are also projected to be on a team that scores more points than Colorado. So really, you would need Shedeur to throw for 500 yards and 4 touchdowns to pay off that price tag with the no upside that he's giving you in the run game. So I really don't think he's a good play at all at $10,000. I'm probably not going to be playing him, even though I do like his prospects in this game going up against FCS competition. It's just hard to get behind that price tag when there's so many other guys who have rushing upside at a cheaper price tag. Like, I think it's quite likely that Grayson McCall might just outscore Shedeur Sanders, and there's $2,900 difference in salary. At the running back position, Offerdahl apparently won the job. Charlie Offerdahl, he's a former walk-on who's been there for a while. He's not that big. He's not that fast, but he apparently earned the job. Dallan Hayden is a transfer from Ohio State who is bigger and faster and can catch passes. He made some explosive plays while he was at Ohio State. If I had to guess, I think Offerdahl will get the start, but I think Hayden's ability as a pass catcher is going to get him some usage in this offense. So to me, this is kind of an avoid situation with both them being priced over $5,500. I just don't really know what to make of it, and I really wouldn't want to pay that much for a guy who's just going to be in a committee at the end of the day. At the wide receiver position, Colorado is looking to play 4 of them, and it's going to be Hunter, Wester, Shepard, and Horn. Now, Travis Hunter is kind of like unsustainable, in my opinion, with what he does on defense as well as what he does on offense. It's asking a lot of him, and it's why you saw inconsistent production from him last year, because there's some games where it just really took a lot out of him to play both sides of the ball. And $9,200, he's the most expensive player on the slate. I'd rather have Luther Burden. I would rather have Casey Concepcion. Like, I would just rather pay down than get a guy who might not play all the snaps at wide receiver. The other 3 receivers, Wester, Shepard, and Horn, all have their own kind of like niches in this offense. Horn is kind of a possession guy. He's more experienced, not a super big average depth of target guy, not a big target monster either. Really, he had his best games at the start of last year, and once Pac-12 play started, kind of cooled off and kind of ceded a lot of targets to Xavier Wheeler. LeJontay Western was a target hog at Florida Atlantic, caught over 100 passes last year, caught over 1,000 yards last year. Had some super explosive games. He lit my Charlotte 49ers up for about 40 fantasy points. This is a guy who can make some explosive plays, and if he's able to get any kind of volume, can very easily pay off that price tag. Will Shepard is a big physical guy that played at Vanderbilt. That Vanderbilt offense didn't have a lot of success last year, but this is a guy who can go up and win jump balls and make contested catches, kind of gives you a vertical element to your passing game that they hadn't had before. And so I really think that all these guys complement each other well. If you're playing Shedeur, which I'm probably not going to, I'm probably playing 2 of them because he probably needs 2 of them to get home to hit value. But again, with all of them kind of having their niches and their roles, it's kind of hard to predict which 2 it's going to be. Now, the best game of the night, in my opinion, is UNC taking on Minnesota. Minnesota is 2.5-point favorites in this one with a total of 50.5. So, in other words, the Vegas projection is 27-24 in favor of the Golden Gophers. Now, there are no depth charts released for this game because both coaches are being childish, in my opinion. PJ Fleck came out and said he wasn't releasing one to not give Carolina an advantage, and Mac Brown said, okay, buddy, well, I'm not releasing one either. What we do know is that Carolina is embroiled in a quarterback controversy between transfer Max Johnson and returning backup Connor Harrell. Jacoby Criswell also transferred back from Arkansas, who was previously at Carolina, because he thought he might be able to win the job, but it appears to be just between Johnson and Harrell. And look, this is another one of those situations. It's co-quarterbacks. I'm not playing it in DFS. Sorry. Just I'd way rather play somebody else who I know is going to play all the snaps. Even though this Carolina system has been great for quarterbacks the last 5 years, I'm going to wait and see who actually wins the job before I start playing. At the running back spot, there is no competition. It's Amarian Hampton. He's great. He's one of the best running backs in all of college football. Ran for over 1,500 yards last year. And no matter who's the quarterback, they're going to feed the beast with Amarian Hampton. Probably objectively the best running back play on the slate, but he is $8,500, so you do have to really work some salary elsewhere to make it work. At the wide receiver position, no Tez Walker this year. He did move on to the NFL. Last year, we actually have a small sample size of games where Tez Walker was not approved by the NCAA to play. And so in those games, McCollum and Paysour were very clearly the top 2 receivers for Carolina. So even though we don't have a depth chart, it's pretty reasonable to believe that those 2 are going to continue being the top 2 wide receivers. And Bryson Nesbitt's going to be the starting tight end this year. A lot of his competition for snaps and targets at the tight end position are now gone, of which he was the best one last year. Anyway, $4,700 is a very reasonable price tag for Bryson Nesbitt, in my opinion, as well. On the Minnesota side, this is an interesting team. So Max Brosmer is going to be their new quarterback. They got rid of Kaliak Manis. I believe he's at Rutgers now. But Brosmer is a guy that is coming up from the FCS level, played at New Hampshire, was very good, And we're kind of not sure how that's going to translate to Minnesota just yet, but it's not like the QB play at Minnesota has been good over the years. I'd be super interested in him if he were priced at $6,500 on this slate, but he's priced above guys like Grayson McCall, and that's really hard to get behind. At the running back position, Darius Taylor to me feels kind of obvious. He's $6,700. He is every bit the workhorse back that Amari and Hampton is. He just didn't get to play a full season last year, so we don't have a full sample size. But this guy's really good. He's a workhorse, and that Carolina defense is verifiably not good, in my opinion. We've seen enough of it over the years. They're not really great at defending the run, not really great at defending the pass. So guys who get guaranteed volume against them are guys we like, and I like Darius Taylor for that reason. The only problem is that as much as he was a workhorse last year, this team had guys transfer in to kind of like try to vulture the role. And Shea Bangura from Ohio, Marcus Major from Oklahoma, Jaron Mangum from BYU in South Florida, as well as the backup last year, Jordan Nubbin. I think it's Nubin. Nubbin is the thing that Chandler had on Friends. Yeah. So, there's a lot of competition for carries, but Taylor was the workhorse last year when he was active. If he's the workhorse again, $6,700 is a great price tag with this matchup. At receiver, don't really know a whole lot of what to expect other than Daniel Jackson was their target monster last year, and I would expect him to do the same again this year. So again, much like with the running back position, when we know that one guy is going to get all the work against a bad defense, that makes him very playable. I do like Daniel Jackson on this slate. The last game of the night is Southern Utah taking on Utah. Again, why did this have to be on the slate? Utah's 38.5-point favorites, total of 52.5, projected to be Utah 45-7 according to Vegas. And look, Utah's a team that I'm not rushing to play guys against for FBS teams. They play very slow. They're very physical. They're good defensively. They have a great home field advantage. So if I don't want to play FBS teams against Utah, probably not touching Southern Utah, if I'm being honest. And this is another team that's very difficult to find a depth chart for. They don't have a running back priced above $4,200. So maybe if you had a depth chart that one of those guys was starting, maybe it might be worth it. But I'm kind of good just sitting this one out on Southern Utah. I got to be honest. On the Utah side, they are getting Cam Rising back for his seventh year of college, I believe it is at this point. He's quite expensive, but this is a guy who can really – in games like this, he tends to put up touchdowns. And so I don't mind him at $9,000. I don't think he's the best quarterback play on the slate, but I think, if I'm doing a 20 max lineups, he's a guy I'm probably going to get to once or twice. Micah Bernard is the guy I'm interested in. So the Utah backfield had a lot of competition for carries last year with Jaquindon Jackson, Sione Vaki, just a lot of guys moving around. He's the guy this year, Micah Bernard is. And this is a game where they're going to have a clear physical advantage up front. They're going to be able to score points. They're projected to score 45. Micah Bernard is probably the guy in Utah I want to get to. And if I'm not getting to Bernard, at the wide receiver position, Utah got a little more firepower by adding Dorian Singer in the portal. They returned starter Money Parks. But the guy I want at the wide receiver spot is really not a wide receiver at all. It's Brant Keithy. He was a great tight end for this Utah team 2 years ago, had a knee injury that had him miss all of 2023. He's back. He's only $5,800. This is the guy that I would consider if you're stacking Cam Rising. I think you can go either one of Singer or Parks, and then probably Keithy as well, or maybe just Keithy, or maybe just Singer or Parks. But I do think that this is an offense that you're going to want to stack Cam Rising if you are playing him. And like I said, Keithy is my preferred pass catcher from this offense. All right, so that is going to do it for this episode, y'all. So like I said, hopefully I was able to help give you guys plenty of information that is going to allow you to pick some winners here on this Thursday night slate. If I gave you anything that's helpful to you, make sure you hit the like button on YouTube, rate and review the audio. It really helps me out a ton when you guys do that. I really appreciate it. I cannot stress enough how much and how helpful that is for me. And so if you do want more from me, if there's any news with depth charts, injuries, whatnot, I do generally tweet about it at Mike's Money Picks. If you have any questions for me, just reach out at Mike's Money Picks. You can also join the Fantasy Corner Discord. Like I said, a lot of great people in there play DFS for a lot of different sports. If you're looking to get better at college football DFS or just keep in the loop and keep informed, that is the place to go. And you'll meet a lot of great people that I've personally enjoyed getting to converse with in there over the last year and a half. And then if you want to know who I'm playing, you want to know who makes my lineups, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/Mike's Money Picks. Here at the start of college football season, the full Patreon is only $3 a month. I will say that as we get into the season, that price is likely to go up because it requires more work from me once we get into the midweek slates and then once college basketball starts. So if you want to get in on it now, that would be my recommendation, and you will be grandfathered in when the price rises. So I cannot recommend enough. If you want those plays, head on over to the Patreon, patreon.com/MikesMoneyPicks. And with this being a new season, if you want to try out any new DFS site, player prop site, sportsbook site, we're partnering with Sign Up Expert. Head on over to signupexpert.com/MikesPicks. What they do is they give you the best offers and promo codes for new users, and they even sync to your location so you know exactly what is available in your state or province. Have to mention province for my north of the border folks. So wait a minute, why did I sound Scottish when I was talking about Canada? Anyway, so that is all for today, guys. Thank you guys for watching and listening to this point. Best of luck to you with Thursday's slates. A few days from now, come back because we're going to have the full Saturday slate preview and the Saturday night slate preview. So make sure you're subscribed for that. Make sure you come back. But thank you guys for watching and listening to this point, and I will see you guys next time.